Jasmine Crockett calls. John Kennedy unfit. Then he played a recording that changed everything. The Georgetown University debate hall was a cauldron of anticipation, its polished wooden floors and towering arched windows framing a scene that felt more like a gladiatorial arena than an academic forum. The air buzzed with the restless energy of students, faculty, and local media crammed into every available seat, their murmurs blending into a low hum that vibrated through the room. Overhead chandeliers cast a warm golden glow, illuminating rows of eager faces, smartphones already poised to capture what promised to be a historic moment. The event was a high-profile discussion on engaging Generation Z in American politics, a topic that had drawn attention not just for its relevance, but for the two figures seated at the debate table: Thupper Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, a seasoned Republican known for his sharp wit and folksy charm, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, a rising Democratic star with a reputation for fiery rhetoric and unapologetic conviction. The stage was set for a clash of ideals, but no one in the room could have predicted the explosive turn the evening would take. As the moderator, Dr. Sarah Martinez, chair of Georgetown's Political Science Department, stepped to the podium, her voice cut through the chatter, commanding silence. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone measured yet authoritative. "Tonight, we are here to discuss a critical issue: how to inspire and engage young Americans in the political process. Our speakers bring unique perspectives, and we expect a lively and respectful exchange of ideas." The audience leaned forward, sensing the weight of the moment. C-SPAN cameras whirred softly in the background, broadcasting the event live to a national audience, while social media platforms lit up with hashtags like #GeorgetownDebate and #YouthInPolitics. Students whispered to one another, some clutching notebooks, others live streaming on their phones. The energy was electric, a mix of academic curiosity and the thrill of witnessing a public showdown. John Kennedy sat at one end of the debate table, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, scanning the room with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent decades navigating the rough waters of American politics. At 74, Kennedy was a political institution, his distinctive Southern drawl and knack for memorable one-liners making him a favorite among conservative voters and a formidable presence in any debate. His navy suit was impeccably tailored, a subtle nod to his Louisiana roots, with a crimson tie that seemed to wink at the audience. He adjusted his glasses, a faint smile playing on his lips as he surveyed the crowd, his demeanor suggesting he was as comfortable here as he was on the Senate floor. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, her presence a stark contrast. At 43, she exuded the energy of a new generation of political leaders. Her vibrant red blazer, a bold statement against the muted tones of the debate hall. Her reputation as a fearless civil rights attorney turned congresswoman preceded her viral moments in congressional hearings, earning her a loyal following among progressive voters. Her dark eyes sparkled with determination, and her posture was one of coiled readiness, like a boxer waiting for the bell. The contrast between the two was striking: Kennedy's seasoned calm against Crockett's dynamic intensity, experience versus ambition, tradition versus change. The audience could feel the tension building, a palpable sense that this was no ordinary debate. Dr. Martinez introduced the speakers with a nod to their accomplishments. Senator John Kennedy has served the people of Louisiana with dedication, bringing his unique perspective to the national stage, she said, prompting a polite round of applause. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, representing Texas's 30th district, has quickly become a powerful voice for her constituents, known for her commitment to justice and equality. The applause grew louder, especially among the younger members of the audience who admired Crockett's bold style. Martinez outlined the format, a 45-minute discussion with each speaker, given equal time to address questions and respond to one another. The opening question was straightforward. How can we better engage young Americans in the political process? Crockett was invited to speak first, and she rose from her seat, her movements deliberate, her voice clear and commanding. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, and thank you to Georgetown for hosting this important conversation. She began her tone warm but firm. Engaging Generation Z starts with authenticity. Young people are tired of empty promises and performative politics. They want leaders who speak truth to power, who fight for issues like economic opportunity, climate action, and racial justice. We need voter registration drives in high schools, civic education that's practical and relatable, and representation that reflects the diversity of this country. Young people don't just want a seat at the table, they want to build the table themselves. Her words resonated with the audience, particularly the students, who nodded enthusiastically, some whispering their agreement. Crockett's delivery was polished, her passion evident, and her points landed with the precision of someone who knew how to connect with a crowd. The applause was immediate, a wave of approval that rippled through the room. Then it was Kennedy's turn. He leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table, his expression one of quiet amusement, as if he were about to share a story over coffee rather than address a national audience. Well, Dr. Martinez, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with these fine folks. He began his Louisiana accent, drawing out each syllable like a melody. Congresswoman Crockett makes some interesting points, and I don't disagree that young folks need to feel heard. But I'd argue it's not just about voter drives or classroom lessons, it's about showing young people that politics can be a place for common sense and real solutions. In Louisiana, we talk straight. We don't sugarcoat problems, and we don't promise the moon. We engage young people by respecting their intelligence, by showing them that government can work for them when it's focused on what matters: jobs, safety, opportunity. That's what gets folks excited about voting, not flashy speeches, but results. His tone was folksy, his words deliberate, and the audience responded with a mix of chuckles and applause. Kennedy's ability to distill complex ideas into simple, relatable terms was on full display, and his calm demeanor seemed to ground the room after Crockett's fiery opening. But the atmosphere shifted when Crockett leaned into her microphone, her expression hardening. Senator Kennedy, with all due respect, she said, her voice carrying a sharp edge, I have to question whether you're the right person to inspire America's youth. Your approach to politics' folksy charm and catchy one-liners might play well on cable news, but it feels out of touch with what young people need today. Your voting record shows a resistance to bold reforms, from climate initiatives to criminal justice, that Gen Z cares deeply about. Frankly, Senator, I'd argue you're unfit to lead the charge on engaging the next generation. The word unfit landed like a thunderbolt, silencing the room. Students exchanged stunned glances, their phones now recording every moment. The C-SPAN cameras zoomed in, capturing the tension etched on every face. Crockett's accusation was a bold move, a direct challenge to a political veteran known for his quick wit and unshakable composure. Whispers spread through the crowd. Had she gone too far? Was this the moment the debate would ignite? Kennedy's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of intensity betraying his calm exterior. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back in his chair, and let the silence hang for a moment, as if savoring the challenge. The audience held its breath, sensing that this was no longer just a discussion about youth engagement, it was a battle of wills, a test of who could command the room. Crockett pressed her advantage, her voice rising with conviction. Young people today are facing crises: climate change, economic inequality, systemic injustice, and they're looking for leaders who will fight for transformative change, not maintain the status quo. Senator, your record suggests a preference for keeping things as they are for prioritizing rhetoric over action. How can someone who's so tied to the past inspire a generation that's demanding a future? Her words were a rallying cry, and a portion of the audience erupted in applause, particularly the younger students who saw Crockett as a voice for their generation. Social media posts began flooding in with users praising her boldness. Crockett just called out Kennedy's whole career. # Georgetown. Debate read one tweet already garnering thousands of likes. But others in the room shifted uncomfortably aware that Crockett's attack had crossed into personal territory. The moderator, Dr. Martinez, raised a hand to restore order, her expression neutral, but her eyes darting between the two speakers. "Senator Kennedy, your response?" She prompted, her tone betraying a hint of curiosity about how he would handle the accusation. Kennedy took a slow sip of water, letting the tension build. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, his drawl deliberate, each word chosen with the precision of a seasoned orator. "Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate your passion," he began, his tone almost paternal, "but I reckon you've mistaken experience for being out of touch. I've spent my time in the Senate listening to folks young, old, and everyone in between, and what they want is someone who tells it like it is, not someone chasing headlines with big promises that don't hold up. You call me unfit, but let's talk about what fitness means. It means showing up for your people, fighting for their jobs, their schools, their communities. It means knowing that change don't come from shouting the loudest, it comes from working the hardest." The audience responded with a wave of applause, particularly from older attendees and students who admired Kennedy's no-nonsense style. His response was a masterclass in deflection, turning Crockett's attack into an opportunity to highlight his own strengths. But he wasn't done. "Now, I don't like to get personal," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, "but since you've thrown down the gauntlet, I might have something to share that'll put this conversation in a new light." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small digital recorder, its presence sending a ripple of curiosity through the room. "Folks, I think it's only fair we have an honest conversation tonight," he said, his eyes locking with Crockett's. "And I've got a little something here that might just help us do that." The room went silent, the air thick with anticipation. Students leaned forward, their phones now aimed at Kennedy, capturing the moment. Crockett's confident demeanor faltered for a split second, her eyes narrowing as she watched Kennedy hold up the recorder. Whispers spread like wildfire. What was on that recording? Was Kennedy about to turn the tables? Dr. Martinez, sensing the shift, hesitated before speaking. "Senator, are you suggesting you have evidence relevant to this discussion?" she asked, her voice cautious but intrigued. Kennedy nodded, his smile now carrying a hint of mischief. "I do, Dr. Martinez, and I think the folks here deserve to hear it before we go any further." The audience was on edge, the tension palpable as Kennedy's finger hovered over the play button. Social media was already exploding with speculation. What's Kennedy got up his sleeve? This is about to get wild. Georgetown. Debate. Read one post, shared hundreds of times in minutes. Crockett sat back. Her arms crossed, her expression unreadable, but her posture tense. The debate, which had started as a discussion about youth engagement, had just taken a dramatic turn, and everyone in the room knew they were witnessing the opening salvo of a confrontation that would be talked about for years to come. Kennedy's next move would either cement his reputation as a political master or risk escalating the debate into uncharted territory. The stage was set, and all eyes were on him. The Georgetown Debate Hall was a pressure cooker, the air thick with anticipation, as Senator John Kennedy held the small digital recorder aloft, its unassuming black casing gleaming under the chandeliers. The audience, a mix of wide-eyed students, stone-faced faculty, and eager reporters, sat frozen, their collective gaze locked on the device that promised to shift the trajectory of the evening. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, seated across from Kennedy, maintained a composed exterior, but the slight tightening of her jaw betrayed a flicker of unease. Her bold accusation calling Kennedy unfit to inspire America's youth had set the stage for a confrontation, and now Kennedy was poised to respond in a way no one had anticipated. The C-SPAN cameras zoomed in, capturing every nuance of the moment, while students' phones lit up the room like fireflies, recording and live-streaming to a world already buzzing with #Georgetown debate. Dr. Sarah Martinez. The moderator cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Senator Kennedy, you've indicated you have a recording. Can you clarify its relevance to this discussion? She asked, her tone professional, but laced with curiosity. Kennedy's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief, his Louisiana drawl slow and deliberate, as he responded. Dr. Martinez, I reckon it's plenty relevant. When someone calls you unfit in front of a room full of folks, you don't just sit there and take it. You bring the truth to the table. And this here, he said, tapping the recorder is gonna shed some light on what's really going on. The audience leaned forward, a low murmur rippling through the crowd. Crockett's posture stiffened, her arms still crossed, but her eyes darted to the recorder, then back to Kennedy as if calculating her next move. Kennedy leaned back in his chair, his demeanor as relaxed as if he were chatting on a porch swing, but his words carried a surgical precision. Now, Congresswoman, you've got a lot of fire, and I respect that. Calling me unfit, though, that's a bold claim. You say my approach is out of touch, that I'm stuck in the past. But let's talk about what it really means to engage young folks in politics. It ain't about who can yell the loudest or get the most likes on social media. It's about trust. It's about showing up for your people day in and day out, with ideas that work. In Louisiana, we've got young folks starting businesses, going to college, serving their communities, and they don't need flashy promises. They need leaders who keep their word. His voice was steady, his accent wrapping each word in a warmth that made the audience nod along, some students even clapping softly. Kennedy's ability to connect to make complex ideas feel like common sense was on full display, and it was clear he wasn't rattled by Crockett's attack. He continued, You talk about bold reforms, Congresswoman, and that's fine. But reform without results is just noise. I've spent my time in the Senate pushing for things like better schools, safer streets, and jobs that let folks build a life. That's what gets young people excited about politics, seeing their government actually deliver. Crockett wasn't about to let Kennedy's folksy charm steal the moment. She leaned forward, her voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the applause. Senator, with respect, your record tells a different story. You've voted against measures that would address the urgent issues young people care about: climate action, student debt, relief, systemic inequities. You call it noise, but those are the fights that define our future. Young Americans want leaders who aren't afraid to challenge the system, not defend it. Your approach, those catchy one-liners and common-sense talking points, feels like a relic, Senator. It's not connecting with a generation that's demanding real change. Her words were a direct hit, and a section of the audience, particularly the younger students, erupted in cheers. Social media posts exploded. Crockett's, not holding back Kennedy's charm, can't hide his record. Georgetown. Debate read one tweet racking up thousands of retweets. Crockett's intensity was magnetic, her ability to channel the frustrations of a generation, making her a formidable opponent. She pressed on, her voice rising. "You say it's about trust. But how can young people trust someone who seems more interested in maintaining the status quo than building a future they can believe in? That's why I stand by my statement. Senator, you're unfit to lead this charge." The room crackled with tension, the audience hanging on every word. Dr. Martinez raised a hand, trying to steer the debate back to policy, but Kennedy wasn't ready to move on. He leaned forward, his smile fading into something sharper, more focused. "Congresswoman, you're throwing around some mighty big words, unfit relic, status quo. But let's get down to brass tacks. If we're going to talk about trust, let's talk about what folks say when they think no one's listening." He held up the recorder again and the room went dead silent, the weight of his words sinking in. "About a month ago, I had a conversation with a young journalist here at Georgetown, working on a piece about political leadership. Seems they had a chat with you too, Congresswoman, and what you said in private don't quite match what you're saying here tonight." Crockett's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face before she masked it with a steely glare. The audience was on edge, phones raised higher, capturing every second. Kennedy pressed the play button, and the room filled with the clear, unmistakable sound of Crockett's voice. "Look, Kennedy's been around forever, and you can't deny he's sharp," the recording began. "He's got this way of connecting with people, making complicated stuff sound simple. Honestly, he's one of the smarter ones in the Senate, even if I don't agree with him. But calling him out gets attention. It's what the base wants." A second voice, presumably the journalist, asked, "So you don't really think he's out of touch?" Crockett's voice continued, "Out of touch? No, not really. He's effective, and he knows his audience. But in this climate, you've got to play hardball to stand out. Calling him unfit. That's just strategy." The recording stopped, and the silence was deafening. Students exchanged shocked glances, their phones still recording but their faces frozen in disbelief. Crockett's confident posture faltered, her hands gripping the edge of the table as she processed what had just happened. Kennedy set the recorder down, his expression calm, but his eyes locked on Crockett. "Now, Congresswoman," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "you've got a lot of talent, and I don't doubt your passion. But if you're going to call me unfit in front of these fine folks, maybe you ought to make sure your own words line up. That recording tells me you don't believe what you're saying about me. So who's really playing politics here?" The audience erupted a mix of gasps, murmurs, and scattered applause. Social media went into overdrive with clips of the recording spreading like wildfire. Kennedy just dropped a bombshell. Crockett caught in her own words. Georgetown. Debate read one post already viral. Dr. Martinez struggled to regain control, her voice barely audible over the commotion. "Let's keep this respectful, please," she said. But the room was beyond her now, caught up in the drama unfolding before them. Crockett recovered quickly, her voice steady but tinged with defensiveness. "Senator, that recording is a cheap shot taken out of context. I was speaking candidly about the challenges of political discourse in today's climate. Yes, I acknowledge your experience, but that doesn't change the fact that your policies don't align with what young people need. You're twisting my words to dodge the real issue." Her response was met with some applause, but it lacked the fire of her earlier remarks, and the audience could sense it. Kennedy shook his head, his smile returning this time with a touch of sympathy. "Congresswoman, I ain't twisting anything. You said what you said. And what you said is that calling me unfit is just a strategy to get attention. That don't sound like the authentic leadership you were talking about earlier. It sounds like politics, as usual." The audience murmured in agreement, and Kennedy leaned back, letting his words sink in. The debate had shifted, irrevocably. Kennedy had turned Crockett's attack against her exposing a crack in her carefully crafted image. The students who had been captivated by Crockett's passion now looked at her with a mix of curiosity and doubt, while Kennedy's calm, strategic response had solidified his position as a master of the moment. The stage was set for the fallout, and the question on everyone's mind was clear: how would Crockett recover from a blow that had shaken the very foundation of her argument? The Georgetown Debate Hall was a storm of raw energy, the kind that crackles when a single moment flips an entire narrative upside down. Senator John Kennedy's revelation of the recording had left the room in a state of stunned disbelief, the silence after its playback giving way to a rising tide of murmurs, gasps, and the frantic tapping of students' fingers on their phones. The C-SPAN cameras, unblinking, captured every detail: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's hands gripping the edge of the table, her face a mask of controlled composure, but her eyes betraying a flicker of panic. Kennedy leaning back in his chair, his expression a blend of calm satisfaction and quiet resolve. His recorder now resting innocently on the table like a loaded weapon. The audience, a mix of Georgetown students, faculty, and local media, was electrified, their attention split between the stage and their screens, where social media was exploding with clips of the recording. Hashtags like #Kennedy exposes Crockett and Georgetown debate were trending within minutes, the viral moment spreading faster than anyone could have predicted. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the moderator, struggled to regain control, her voice strained as she raised a hand. "Let's return to the topic at hand," she urged, but the room was beyond her now, caught in the gravitational pull of Kennedy's masterstroke. The debate, meant to be a discussion about engaging Generation Z in politics, had become a public trial of authenticity, and Crockett was on the defensive. Crockett took a deep breath, her posture straightening as she fought to reclaim the narrative. "Senator Kennedy, that was a low blow." She began, her voice steady, but laced with an edge of indignation. "You took a private conversation recorded without my full awareness and used it to twist the narrative. Yes, I acknowledged your experience because I'm honest enough to give credit where it's due. But that doesn't change the core issue: your policies and approach don't resonate with young people. You're deflecting from that truth by playing a soundbite." Her words were measured, an attempt to pivot back to her original argument, but the audience's reaction was mixed. Some students clapped, appreciating her effort to stand her ground, but others exchanged skeptical glances, their trust shaken by the recording's revelation that her public attacks were a calculated strategy. Social media posts reflected the divide, Crockett's holding her own, but that recording hurts. Hush, Georgetown. Debate read one tweet, while another declared she called him unfit, but admitted he's sharp in private. That's hypocrisy. Kennedy wins this round. The room buzzed with whispered debates, students leaning toward one another, dissecting every word. Crockett's charisma, which had carried her through the debate's opening, now seemed to falter under the weight of her own words echoing back at her. Kennedy, sensing the shift in the room, didn't let the moment pass. He leaned forward, his Louisiana drawl softening, almost conversational, but every word landing with precision. "Congresswoman, I don't take pleasure in playing that recording," he said, though the glint in his eye suggested otherwise. "But when you stand up here and call me unfit, question my commitment to the folks I serve. I reckon it's only fair to let these fine people hear what you really think. You said I'm sharp, effective, that I know my audience. Yet, here you are telling these students I'm a relic out of touch, unfit. Now, I don't mind a good fight, but I do mind when folks play fast and loose with the truth just to score points." The audience erupted in applause, louder this time, particularly from older attendees and students who admired Kennedy's straightforward style. His ability to turn Crockett's accusation into a lesson on integrity was masterful, and the room felt it. He continued, his voice rising slightly. Engaging young folks in politics ain't about grandstanding or chasing viral moments. It's about showing them you mean what you say, whether you're in a debate hall or a private chat. That's the kind of leadership they deserve. The applause grew a wave of approval that seemed to lift Kennedy's presence, making him seem larger than life despite his unassuming demeanor. Crockett's face tightened, her eyes scanning the crowd as she realized the tide was turning against her. She tried to counter, her voice sharp but less confident. Senator, you're framing this as a matter of integrity, but let's be clear that recording was a strategic move to distract from your record. Young people care about action on climate, on economic opportunity, on justice. Your votes in the Senate show a pattern of resisting the bold changes they're demanding. You can play all the recordings you want, but you can't erase that truth. Her words sparked some cheers, particularly from students who aligned with her progressive ideals, but the energy was noticeably weaker than before. The recording had planted a seed of doubt, and Crockett's attempt to redirect the conversation felt like a desperate lunge. Social media was relentless, with clips of Kennedy's response racking up thousands of shares. Kennedy just schooled Crockett on authenticity. That recording was brutal, one post read, while another user wrote, Crockett's trying to spin this, but she's losing the room. Hatch. Kennedy exposes Crockett. The hashtag was now trending nationally, the moment cementing itself as a viral phenomenon. Dr. Martinez, sensing the debate was spiraling, tried to steer it back to policy. Let's move to the next question, she said, her voice firm. What specific policies would you propose to increase youth voter turnout? But the audience wasn't ready to move on, their attention still fixed on the drama. Kennedy raised a hand, signaling he wasn't done. Dr. Martinez, if I may, I think we owe these folks a little more clarity, he said, his tone polite, but commanding. The Congresswoman's right about one thing: young people want action. But they also want leaders they can trust. That recording wasn't about distracting from my record. It was about showing these students what real leadership looks like. It's not about saying one thing in private and another in public. It's about standing by your principles even when the cameras ain't rolling. The room roared with applause, the loudest of the night, as students and faculty alike nodded in agreement. Kennedy's words resonated not just because of the recording, but because of the conviction behind them. His folksy charm, which Crockett had dismissed as outdated, was proving to be his greatest asset, connecting with the audience on a level that felt personal, genuine. Crockett, visibly rattled, tried one last push. Senator, you're good at spinning a story. I'll give you that, she said, forcing a smile. But young people aren't fooled by charm. They want leaders who fight for them, not just talk a good game. Your record speaks louder than any recording. Her words were met with scattered applause, but the momentum had shifted decisively. The audience, once split between the two speakers, now seemed to lean toward Kennedy, his authenticity and strategic use of the recording outweighing Crockett's passionate but now questionable rhetoric. As the debate moved to the next question, the room remained charged, students whispering furiously, their phones capturing every angle of Crockett's strained expression and Kennedy's quiet confidence. The fallout was immediate. Within minutes, news outlets were picking up the story with headlines like Kennedy turns tables on Crockett in Georgetown, debate shocker. Local reporters pushed toward the stage, shouting questions as Dr. Martinez struggled to maintain order. Kennedy, unfazed, answered the next question with his usual wit. While Crockett's responses grew shorter, her energy dimmed by the weight of the moment. The recording had changed everything, exposing a crack in her armor and elevating Kennedy as a symbol of principled leadership. The question now was not just how Crockett would recover, but whether she could salvage her credibility in the face of a moment that had already reshaped the narrative of the night. The Georgetown Debate Hall was a whirlwind of emotion, its polished walls echoing with the aftershocks of Senator John Kennedy's devastating counterstrike. The recording he played had turned the evening on its head, exposing Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's private admission that her public attack on his fitness was a calculated strategy. The audience, students, faculty, and media was still reeling, their phones glowing with rapid-fire posts as #KennedyExposes. Crockett dominated social media. Clips of the moment, particularly Kennedy's calm delivery and Crockett's stunned reaction, had been shared thousands of times, with one viral tweet reading, "Kennedy just redefined owning the room." Crockett didn't see that coming. Her Georgetown debate. The C-SPAN cameras, ever present, captured the raw intensity of the scene. Kennedy, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, exuding the quiet confidence of a seasoned politician. Crockett, her hands clasped tightly, her face a mask of determination, struggling to conceal the damage done. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the moderator, was fighting a losing battle to restore order. Her calls for calm drowned out by the buzz of whispered conversations and the clatter of keyboards. The debate, originally about engaging Generation Z in politics, had become a masterclass in authenticity, and Kennedy had emerged as its unlikely hero. As the formal discussion drew to a close, Kennedy seized the moment to address the audience directly, his Louisiana drawl wrapping the room in a warmth that felt both comforting and commanding. "Folks, I didn't come here tonight to embarrass anyone," he began, his voice steady, almost gentle. "But when you step into a room like this, with these bright young minds and folks watching at home, you owe 'em the truth. Politics ain't a game of gotcha, it's about serving people. Young folks especially, they can smell inauthenticity a mile away. They want leaders who say what they mean, whether it's in a debate hall or a coffee shop. That's how you get 'em to care about voting, about showing up. You show 'em that their trust ain't misplaced." The audience erupted in applause, the sound swelling from every corner of the hall. Students who had been captivated by Crockett's fiery rhetoric earlier now nodded thoughtfully, their expressions reflecting a newfound respect for Kennedy's principled stand. His words weren't just a defense. They were a call to action, a reminder that leadership demanded consistency and integrity. Social media lit up with praise, Kennedy's talking straight to these kids' hearts. That's real leadership. To Georgetown. Debate read one post, garnering thousands of likes in minutes. Crockett, sensing the room slipping away, made a final attempt to reclaim her footing. She stood, her red blazer a stark contrast to the muted chaos around her, and addressed the audience with a voice that trembled slightly but grew stronger with each word. "I want to be clear," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. That recording was a snapshot of a candid moment, not the full picture of who I am or what I stand for. "I fight for my constituents every day, for economic opportunity, for justice, for a future that works for everyone. If I've learned anything tonight, it's that we all have to be careful about how our words can be used against us. But I'm not here to play games. I'm here to push for change. And I'll keep doing that, no matter what." Her words drew applause, particularly from students who admired her resilience, but the energy was subdued compared to the thunderous response to Kennedy. The recording had shifted the narrative, casting doubt on her authenticity, and her attempt to pivot felt like too little, too late. A tweet summed up the sentiment, Crockett's trying, but that recording was a gut punch. Hard to come back from that. Kennedy exposes Crockett. The audience was still processing the moment, their phones capturing every angle of Crockett's determined expression and Kennedy's understated triumph. As Dr. Martinez officially concluded the debate, the hall dissolved into a frenzy of activity. Students clustered in groups, their voices animated as they dissected the night's events. Reporters surged toward the stage, shouting questions at both speakers, their microphones jostling for position. Crockett, her composure regained, answered a few questions with measured responses, emphasizing her commitment to her constituents and brushing off the recording as a distraction. But her usual fire was dimmed, and she exited the stage quickly, flanked by her team. Kennedy, by contrast, lingered, shaking hands with students and chatting with reporters, his easy smile and quick wit keeping the crowd engaged. "Senator, how did you know to bring that recording?" One reporter asked, her notepad ready. Kennedy chuckled, adjusting his glasses. "Well, I've been around long enough to know you don't walk into a fight without a plan. That's all I'll say." His response drew laughter, and the moment was instantly shared online, further cementing his victory in the court of public opinion. The fallout was swift and relentless. By the time the debate ended at Kennedy Exposes, Crockett was the top trending hashtag nationally with over 150,000 posts and counting. News outlets ran with the story, their headlines capturing the drama Kennedy's recording stuns Crockett in Georgetown. Debate blared one while another declared Crockett's attack backfires as Kennedy proves his point. Cable news networks looped the clip of the recording with pundits analyzing every nuance. A CNN analyst noted Kennedy's move was a masterclass in political strategy. He didn't just defend himself, he exposed a deeper issue about authenticity in politics. Even progressive outlets, typically sympathetic to Crockett, acknowledged the damage. Crockett's passion is undeniable, but that recording raises questions about her approach. She'll need to rebuild trust. On campus, the impact was immediate. Students who had rallied behind Crockett's bold rhetoric began questioning her motives. "I loved her energy, but now I'm wondering if it's all for show," said Emily Nguyen, a sophomore political science major, to a campus reporter. The Young Democrats Club, which had seen a surge in membership after Crockett's rise, reported a dip in attendance at their next meeting, a sign of the recording's ripple effect. Kennedy, meanwhile, emerged as a beacon of authenticity. His performance was dissected in political science classes, with professors praising his ability to turn a personal attack into a broader lesson. "What Kennedy did wasn't just about winning a debate," said Dr. Michael Roberts, a Georgetown professor. "He showed students that leadership is about consistency. Your private words should match your public ones. That's a lesson for any aspiring politician." Kennedy's office reported a flood of supportive messages with constituents and students alike, praising his principled stand. His social media following grew by tens of thousands overnight, with young voters in particular lauding his straightforward approach. "I didn't know much about Kennedy before, but he's the real deal," tweeted one Georgetown student, her post shared widely. The senator, true to form, kept his public comments minimal, letting the recording and his debate performance speak for themselves. But in private conversations with aides, he reportedly expressed hope that the moment would inspire young people to demand more from their leaders. The lesson. The Georgetown debate became a case study in the power of authenticity. Kennedy's victory wasn't just about a well-timed recording, it was about demonstrating that true leadership requires alignment between private beliefs and public actions. For students, the takeaway was clear: politics isn't a performance. It's a responsibility. The recording exposed the dangers of treating public discourse as a game where words are weaponized for attention rather than truth. Crockett, to her credit, took the lesson to heart, later reflecting in an interview, "I've learned to be more mindful of how I engage. Authenticity matters, and I'm committed to showing that in my work." For young Americans watching the debate was a wake-up call. They deserved leaders who believed in their causes, not just those who could sell them. Kennedy's stand reminded them that trust is earned through consistency, not charisma, and that the future of politics depends on leaders who see service as a duty, not a stage. The lesson resonated beyond the debate hall, sparking conversations on campuses and online about what it means to lead with integrity. It was a reminder that in a world of sound bites and viral moments, authenticity is the currency that endures, inspiring a new generation to engage in politics with honesty and purpose.